All right.
This is Kentucky's Voice Radio, covering the latest state and local issues with Tom Fallbush, Bob Scott, and Jim Waters.
All right, welcome to the show today. Welcome to Kentucky's Voice. I'm your host today, Tom Fallbush. I've got a co-host today. I'm fortunate to have Bob Scott with me today. So we're two gentlemen that are going to riff on a few topics here. And well, the main topic that we're going to talk about today is it's June of this year, June 2025. What is June? Well, June is is known as Pride Month. It's been designated as Pride Month, and so our culture now has to take an entire month of the year. Not just a day. Moms only get a day. Dads only get a day. Veterans get maybe 1, maybe 2 days. But we're going to give a whole month to this movement called the LGBT movement, and we're going to celebrate it. And you have to celebrate it. And you better bow down and celebrate it and wave your flags, or else you're a hater. And so, we're going to talk about that movement today and talk about where we're at in the culture and. I think we have a pretty good show lined up for you. And just also, Bob, I'm going to play a clip here of the Pride Parade that just occurred in Louisville about a week ago, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But we've got a moment in culture where it seems like this whole woke movement, the whole LGBT movement, all that has sort of ran its course on some level, and it's almost like the people have sort of woken up. I mean, almost the people, the traditional America, the folks on the right we've sort of woken up to the fact that this LGBT movement is kind of toxic, and it's kind of it has some really bad agendas, and they're starting to come after our kids now. They're not content with just being hey, just tolerate us and just let us, don't pick on the gays. Remember, we're the nice gay people that cut your hair and decorate your house. Don't pick on us. Remember, we're friendly guys. It went from that. It went to now we're going to put a drag queen in the school, and you better just let us teach your kids this stuff, and if you don't let your kid transition, we're gonna take your kid away. It's gone from one extreme to the other, and I think people have kind of woken up, especially because they went after the kids. Right? You go after the kids, that wakes people up, and so anyway, just your quick thoughts on that. And we'll go to this video.
No, I agree 100%, and I think I know the election of Donald J. Trump last November pretty much was one of the many messages that were being sent to the left and really to our nation in general. And I'll tell you what, I think people are starting to turn back to the basics that made our country great. What made America great was things like patriotism and love for our country, love for God. These are things, love for our flag.
Right.
These were all things, at least that I grew up with. I'm a little older, but still, as a child, I had that core indoctrination in a good way.
Yeah.
I call a good basic foundation that was laid, and I believe we're getting back to that, because what you just said a second ago, Tom, the absurdity of where the movement has gone on the left with regard to these issues has been absolutely crippling America.
That's right.
And people are sick and tired of it. You know what I'm prideful of, and I'm standing up for right now today. I am prideful of our United States military. And the things that they just accomplished over in Iran. An extremely successful airstrike over there that took out the nuclear capabilities as far as Iran, death to America, Iran, and death to Israel. Iran has propagated upon the world, and I am very prideful of our military and salute them. And I just watched Pete Hegseth do an incredible news conference in which he was talking about that. And I'll be honest, I don't know if you saw it or not, Tom. But
I did.
It brought a tear to my eye.
Yeah.
Several tears to my eyes as I realized, and he was talking about, and this is it. This is the core of America, people. The young people that were involved in the strike, and from colonels all the way down to privates, and then not just that strike, but also defending the bass and guitar with regard
with,
to
with the Patriot batteries and all that. Yeah.
missiles that were launched against them.
Heroism. You know, I think traditional
Incredible.
values,
Thank God.
heroism, normal gender roles, traditional views of America. You know, we're going back to things that work, right? Because, you know, stupid is not sustainable. Right?
No.
It's just not. It just, you know, people may play off all these crazy ideas and, hey, we can do this now. We can live this way. Well, there is a truth and a reality. And if your ideas don't line up with truth and reality, guess what? They fail, and there's consequences of that. And so it's kind of, you know, nature plays its course. For example, two men cannot have a child, right? Two men cannot have a child, right? So two women cannot have a child, right? So that means if you promote a lot of this sort of relationships, because this is being promoted, if you promote a lot of these type of relationships, you're not going to have very many children. So there's a consequence there. So guess what? Your culture starts declining because you have less people. Your civilization starts declining and dying off. And we're starting to see some of that right now. We have a birth rate crisis in America, and I'm not blaming it all on the LGBT movement. There's a lot of issues there, from, you know, feminism to the economy to lots of things. But it does, surely it does. We're going to get into that later in the segment. I'll show you the percentage of people in Gen Z that identify themselves as LGBT. Off the charts compared to other generations. What does that mean for the future of our country? Are we going to have people, you know, here in the next 20, 30 years to even, you know, run things? I mean, it's just, and we're really, that's not just a hypothetical academic game now. This is a real concern. People are really worried about, are there going to be enough people to maintain things? And so some of these ideas, we're libertine, we're going to live and let live, we're sophisticated, you know, well, yeah, but guess what? There's a broader macro impact of this, and sorry, I should have put my phone on stun. There we go. Cell phone's on stun. So there's broader impacts to this, such as, you know, you won't have a civilization anymore if you just promote this stuff. Because, you know, so anyway, let's play this video real quick. This is the Pride Parade that just happened in Kentucky, in Louisville.
Celebrate. Pride festivals are happening throughout Kentuckiana, with the biggest one happening today.
That's right, and WLKY's Megan Matthews went to that event and has more on Kentuckiana's 2025 Pride Festival.
On Saturday, the 25th annual Kentuckiana Pride Festival was held down at Waterfront Park, and although hot, an estimated 20,000 people showed up in attendance. The word love was a common theme for many throughout Kentuckiana's 2025 Pride.
We're all people, and it comes back to, instead of the hate that we're sharing, let's share the love of who we are.
And whether it was your first time,
it feels amazing. I'm happy to be here.
Or you've been coming for years.
It was back when the festival was on the Belvedere back in the day. So it's
recording stopped.
Actual number of years, I couldn't tell you.
It's a place many members of the LGBTQ plus community and allies say they are proud
recording
to be
in
a part
progress.
of.
Showing pride in who you are, no matter what you are, whether gay, straight, just different culture, everything.
Accepting people for who they are and where they are.
For Rodney Kaufman, the president of the Kentuckiana Pride Foundation, it's a sense of pride, knowing how far the community has come.
Growing up in the 80s and 90s when it wasn't so acceptable, to come out and just be able to feel safe and be yourself. I mean, everyone's different, either they're gay or straight. Just be who you are and don't be ashamed of it.
With over 150 vendors and food options, as well as resources like churches and healthcare, there really was something for everyone.
Nice to give this avenue for people to come out and make connections and grow in life.
With headliners like Natasha Bedingfield and celebrations going on until 10 p.m. At the Big Four lawn, Megan Matthews, WLKY News.
Megan, thank you. And
we'll stop there. But there's so much I can say about that. But one thing I want to comment on is that, there's a gentleman in there saying, hey, we just want to celebrate about who we are, and we just want to put down the hate and all this, and I really take issues with that. That's the assumption that movement wants to put out there. It's a straw man they want to build, that if you are against the agenda, if you somehow have a concern about same-sex attractions and the lifestyles that play into that you're somehow a hater, right? You're someone that doesn't affirm who they are, and then they describe themselves. Okay, I define myself as a transgender. I define myself as a gay, as a lesbian, as a one of these 15,000 genders now that so that they're the ones that define their humanity by the way they want to have sex, or the way that they're attracted to things. I don't do that. You're a human being, right? You're a human being that has maybe a same-sex attraction, that might have some issues going on where you feel like, you're trapped in the wrong body or whatever. But those are issues. That isn't you're not defined as that. Those are just issues that are impacting your life. And so it is a lie that they can take that and glom on to, say, the civil rights movement, which was a noble movement, of African Americans that were being discriminated against, segregation and all this. Well, those are immutable characteristics. Being black is immutable. Being a woman is an immutable characteristic. Being a man is. There's certain things that you can't change, and if we were discriminating on that, that's fine. No, but these same-sex attractions and all these gender roles that we take on, those things are very fluid. Very, very fluid. People can come in and out of those things all the time. So that's totally different category. And so now, fine, we shouldn't mistreat people if they're fine people that just happen to have these issues or happen to have a same-sex attraction. We're all about that, but we're way beyond that now. This is into coercion, and you better just get behind the LGBT train, or else you're a hater, and we're going to cancel you. And we're going to talk about what that movement has done over the past decade to really turn people against it. And so we're talking about Pride Month, and maybe it's not Pride Month anymore, so because we're getting tired of it.
Now, back to Kentucky's Voice Radio, online at kyvoice.org.
All right, welcome back. We're talking about Pride Month. We're talking about this is the end of Pride Month, roughly, and it seems like the culture has kind of moved on a bit from Pride Month, and I think the whole LGBT movement, the whole the whole push we've had over the past decade or so to really embrace that and celebrate it, and you better get behind it or else you're a hater and we're going to cancel you if you don't. That sort of has run its course, and people are sort of like, okay, we kind of know what your agenda is now, and you're kind of weird, and we don't like you, and we're not supporting that anymore. And so you're seeing a lot of corporations pull out of these parades, and a lot of corporate support in general dropping, and I think, which reflects the mood of the country right now. And I think that's a healthy thing. And so, but Bob, we had a text come in from a text line. By the way, you can text us. Love to hear your opinion. 502-571-0970. Text us. But yeah, go ahead, Bob.
Kind of backs up, Tom, what you were talking about earlier. And the person who texted in said, please explain, if you can, what Pride Month or the Pride flag represent other than a preference for sexual activity. Therefore, why would decent adults advertise their sexual preference? Straight folks don't advertise their sexual preference.
Yeah. Right, exactly. It's just, and that's what we need to focus on here. This is just a lifestyle celebration. That's all this is. This isn't a civil rights movement, and I, like I said, I get kind of where the genesis of the movement came from. There was probably, there probably was a lot of mistreatment of gays and lesbians and people with those sort of lifestyles throughout history, and that's sorry, that sucks. I'm sorry. That's a terrible thing to have to live through that. Yeah. At the same time, these things are probably, these lifestyles and these same-sex attractions or whatever, these things are problematic in someone's life. These are not probably the best for human flourishing, for the person involved and for the culture around. And so there is almost like a sort of a built-in antibody that a culture has when they see this. They kind of, in a crass way, in a low-class way, I think people, you can see how, they see that and people are a bit revolted by it. It's just unnatural for people that have normal heterosexual attractions to see, two men kissing in public and not have a reaction like, oh, that's kind of creepy. That's kind of odd. That's kind of different. Now, so what do you do with that? Do you say, okay, well, these are men, these are grown adults, we'll let them do that. That's fine. That's their life, but let's hide it from the kids because that's kind of we don't want our kids exposed. I mean, these are, we've been trying to deal with that for decades now, but there's a difference between going through and saying, now this needs to be celebrated. And as a matter of fact, everybody needs to get on board. And if you have any problems with it, you're bad. You're the problem. And this should be the standard now. This fluidity in sexual behavior and all these attractions and all this, that is the norm, and that is what's fashionable even. And if you don't get behind this, then you're the bad person. And that's just wrong, because people get it at their heart of hearts that there's, like I said, there's problems with that lifestyle, just from living, from day to day. Just many people have. I've got family members. I got very prominent family members that are very prominent in this movement, right? And I won't share that, but very prominent in this movement that I love dearly, and and they're just wonderful people. But at the same time, you see the problematic nature of that lifestyle and how it's impacted their life. And not to mention just the fact that if everybody did this, we wouldn't be around, So
yeah.
And this, you're not born this way. There's no evidence of that. I mean, so it's an affectation that can come on people. We can get into let me say this one more thing on this, Bob. I got a little thing I wanted to mention just on this, and I want to make sure I get these notes out because, at the end of the day, there's nothing wrong with seeing these sort of behaviors with a sort of concern and not embracing the ideology around it. It's not hate. It's love to have these concerns. If you love somebody, you want to tell them the truth, right? And the truth is these sort of behaviors and inclinations are not necessarily good for human flourishing, right? We all agree with that, either personally or as a culture. And those who hold deeply held beliefs about the spiritual nature of this stuff, right? If you're a Christian and you really believe that maybe there's a sinful nature to acting out on these desires, those people that have those deeply held beliefs are not bad people, right? We're just believing what Western culture and culture as a whole has believed for more than 2,000 years. So we're not bad people, and so maybe there's some. If people have believed this for millennia, maybe there's a reason for that. It's been tested by time that these things are problematic, and so, and those who deeply held beliefs. I said that, And then, sorry, go through my notes here. Give me a sec. And being uncomfortable with same-sex marriage and cross, so for example, being uncomfortable with same-sex marriage, or a cross-dressing man going into a women's restroom, or having a drag queen groom your children in your school, is not something you should get over. These are healthy reactions to things that in our heart of hearts we know that are problematic. They're problematic for the people involved and for everyone around it. And it doesn't mean we hate the people involved. We just have to confront it and deal with it. And Bob, I think you and I both, we kind of resent the way that the movement tries to build these straw mans of if you have a disagreement, then you're a hater.
I could tell you, Tom, and just re-echoing what you were talking about a little bit earlier, as do I think a lot of our listeners and viewers do. I have a lot of friends and family, even some family members that have identified themselves as being gay or homosexual, and I can tell you definitively, not one person, including myself, has shown any kind of hate or dislike for them as a human being.
That's right.
Whatsoever, and it does get a little frustrating. I think when you start hearing things being said that and again they try to play the sympathy card. That they're being
talk
hated
down to you
on.
and talk about saying that you're a hater for not agreeing with me. That is so condescending and insulting.
It is.
We need to start reacting that way. What do you mean I'm a hater? I'm not a hater. That is terrible for you to say that.
That's right.
That's insulting. It's an attack on my character, and I don't appreciate that at all. So go ahead.
One other point I want to make. You could take. You were talking about going to one extreme one way, which. That movement obviously has gone to an extreme, in your face type situation. But I also know within the Christian faith, there were groups in the, I believe, late 1800s or even going back a little bit further than that. But they got to a point that they said Christians should not have sexual relations with
Shakers.
each other.
Yeah, the Shakers. Right. Yeah, here in Kentucky.
And guess what happened with
they're
those
gone.
movements?
There aren't any Shakers in Kentucky anymore. Right. Yeah,
that's correct.
There's it's a little Christian cult
and
called
Shaker
the Shakers.
Village is a great place to go visit.
That's right. But they're not around anymore.
Essentially, it's a monument to a non-existent religion now.
That's exactly right, and exactly. So it has a cultural impact beyond just the personal lives of these folks, and especially because, like I said, I believe in it, and it's been proven out that these are affectations. These are things that can come on people for various reasons. It's very complex reasons. Usually has to do with some childhood development issues and those sort of issues, family trauma, whatever. But they can come on people, but they're very fluid, and things, especially with women. Young women can be very fluid in this space. If it's fashionable to become lesbian and be bisexual, suddenly a lot of women are suddenly bisexual and lesbian, and you see that right now. 20% of young women identify themselves as LGBT in some level, and so that just happened.
And why is that happening?
Why is that
it's
happening?
Because of the programming,
exactly,
and the cultural misappropriation, that's happened from leftist groups, and unfortunately, it did for a period of time filter into our government. I know we're going to talk a little bit later about. We are seeing some tides change.
That's right.
Thank God, but these were real things that do have an impact, and I'd even make an argument that. Our enemies have implanted a lot of things in support of these kind of things in our country to help bring about our downfall.
Absolutely, and so there's listen. If you don't want to have bake a cake for a same-sex wedding, or you lose your business, right? If you speak out against LGBT ideas, and you'll lose your professional career. You don't use pronouns, you go to jail. You're not happy with the kids getting transitions, we'll take it away from you. That's what we've lived through the past decade. This coercion and this movement that tries to force this stuff. If you don't agree, you're going to pay the price. And that's what people are rejecting, and they're tired of it. They're tolerant and they're loving in America, but we're not going to be bullied anymore. And that's why your movement is going to pass on. And we're tired of it. So we'll be right back.
back to Kentucky's Voice Radio online at kyvoice.org.
All right, we're talking about Pride Month and the LGBT movement and how it's sort of ran its course, I think, culturally, and I think it's lost its support generally amongst the average American. I think the average American has sort of woken up to what it truly is. It's no longer just a movement of just, hey, you just need to tolerate us and let us live. It's not that anymore. It's like, hey, we're going to come in and change the definition of what a woman is and we're going to force your kids to undergo indoctrination so they're okay with these lifestyle choices and if you don't go along with it and bow down and wave the pride flag, you lose your job. You will get canceled. You lose your professional certification if you don't line up with the standards of some industry that's now woke. If you don't bake the cake for the gay wedding, you're going to lose your business. If you don't use the pronoun properly, you're going to go to jail. If you don't allow your kid to transition, we're going to take them away from you. That's the stuff we've witnessed over the past decade. So that's the true nature of this movement now. It's not just tolerance, it's coercion and it's enforcement. And we have rightfully as a culture, rejected that. We have vomited this stuff out because we know, first of all, it was just odd to begin with. Just the whole same-sex attraction for most people to have normal heterosexual view. That's just a bit unusual, and but we can tolerate it if you're an adult, and you keep it in your bedroom, whatever. We're going to pray for you. We hope you come out of that stuff because it's not good for you, but we're not going to persecute you. We can, we get that. We're at a different level now. You better celebrate this. We're going to be running down your streets naked in parades, and you better bring all your kids to witness this, or else you're the bad person, you're the hater, and we're going to persecute you. That's what we're going through. People are done with it, and thank God this movement is starting to lose its support. And so, Bob, we had some texts come in, and
I think we've touched a nerve today with our viewers and listeners. Another great comment. Just another example of minority movements trying to bully the majority. The majority has looked the other way way too long.
That's it. Exactly right. Yeah, exactly. But pull this up. I've got some pictures I want to share. This is pictures from the Pride Parade that just occurred in Louisville. And Mr. Producer, I've got it up on my laptop here. So, it seems like every day. Oh, there we go. Nice drag queen. Great. For everybody to see. And of course, there's the mayor. We love Mr. Greenberg is there supporting the movement. And let's see who else here. We've got, of course, the fire department celebrating it. MSD supporting it. Oh, great. That's wonderful. We've got, UPS. There we go. So remember, UPS is still supporting this stuff. I don't have a picture of this, but Kroger is a big sponsor of this right now. So Kroger, UPS. Matter of fact, I'll pull up a list of who all sponsored this year because you should know that. You should know this. There we go. Just normal everyday Americans celebrate. Oh, look, the kids. The kids get to enjoy the Pride Parade. And so with all the the sexual deviancy that is on display at Pride Parade. Let's just be clear about it. Find these. I'm sure these are nice people in everyday life, but they're you need to go to a Pride Parade. You got to see what these things are about. They're not just we're celebrating our political movement. It's like we're celebrating all of our fetishes, and we want everybody to see it. And it's kind of look, more kids. We're spring kids to the fetish parade, and so it's just It just is what it is. I don't have any real dark pictures here. I think I've kind of edited some of that, but so anyway, it is what it is. And I'll tell you what, Bob, it's not just an issue of we're uncomfortable with this, or there's moral issues and da 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 da. It's kind of a civilizational thing, and I've got a clip here, and I want to get your comment on this. This is from Camille Paglia. All right, Camille Paglia she's a scholar. I think she taught at Harvard or Yale. Anyway, she's one of the America's great scholars on feminism, on sexual issues. She's a lesbian. She's a left winger generally, but she is the most prescient person on this topic, that especially when it comes to the history of this and what it means. And so I want to play this clip and get everyone's thoughts, and we'll talk about this. So.
exists. You see, this is the proof of it. But now I began all of my studies. My book Sexual Personae began as a dissertation at Yale graduate school on androgyny. I've always been fascinated, attracted, to the subject of androgyny, and that's what sexual personae is. I explored it in history, but the more I explored it, I realized that that historically, the movement toward androgyny occurs in late phases of culture. Okay, as a civilization is starting to unravel. Okay, and that you can find it again and again and again through history in the Greek art. Okay, you can see it happening. All of a sudden, okay, there's a kind of there's the sculptures of handsome nude young men athletes that used to be very robust. Okay, in the archaic period, suddenly began to seem like wet noodles. Okay, toward the end. Okay, and that the people who live in such periods, a late phase of culture, whether it's the Hellenistic era, whether it's the Roman Empire, whether it's the Mauve decade of Oscar Wilde in the 1890s, whether it's Weimar Germany, people who live at such times, okay, feel that they're very sophisticated, they're very cosmopolitan, okay, and homosexuality, heterosexuality, so what, anything goes, and so on. All right, but from the perspective of historical distance, okay, you can see that it's a culture that no longer believes in itself, okay, and then what you invariably get are people who are convinced of the power of heroic masculinity, okay, on the edges, whether they're the Vandals and the Huns, okay, or whether they're the barbarians of ISIS, okay, you see them, starting to mass on the outsides of the culture, and that's what we have right now. That there is a tremendous and rather terrifying disconnect between the infatuation with the transgender movement in our own culture and what's going on out there, okay, right? And so I mean, that's why I'm concerned. I feel it's ominous, okay? I question whether the transgender choice is indeed genuine in every single case. But what concerns me is when well-meaning adults, believe that they're helping people by making it easier some permanent change in the body from which there is no going back.
There we go. So, there we go. It's clear. Anybody that really looks at this from a historical perspective, from a cultural perspective, we've seen this before. This is not new. That's one thing about human beings. We think that everything we experience is new to man, and everything it's not. Everything we've gone through, especially when it comes to these sort of issues, we've seen before. I mean, Weimar Germany. If you ever, right before World War II, there was huge rise of homosexuality and everything. Right before that, culture collapses through the war. Everything she mentioned. These are, yes, it is a sign of cultural decline, and I think we all see that we all sense that we're sort of in this late stage of American culture, and this stuff is. There's a result. There's an impact to this. I'm lost for words here. There's an oncoming train, and we're all getting concerned about it. And I tell you what, the immigration thing is kind of a interesting angle on to just add to this. There are cultures, like she said, that aren't buying into this stuff, that believe in masculinity, believe in traditional gender roles, and they're starting to immigrate into the country, right? So I see two groups specifically that I'm thinking of. Hispanic culture, which is they have the machismo and Marianismo. They're very believe in masculine and feminine, and guess what? They're growing in influence, and maybe that's that's at least we're not Europe, where most of the immigration is coming from a hostile culture. At least Hispanic culture is generally Christian, and but still, that seems to be supplanting a lot of American culture as Americans aren't having kids. And then you also have Middle Eastern culture,
yes,
which is very masculine and very anti this stuff. And you're starting to see, in Europe especially, this whole movement of, you all can sure dance around half naked, all your men are gay, that's fine. We're just going to take over your country. We're just going to take over your town, and I don't see any real strength to kind of resist this. Islam's on the ascendant, and you better bow down. And so, and that's just happening. I mean, you can just play around it all you want. That's reality. It's happening, and she's seen it in history. Anyway, Bob, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, spot on, Tom. Fortunately, you are seeing countries in Europe starting to push back. Poland, Hungary, Italy. those are countries that are pushing back against the woke agenda, if you will. But a lot of those, I'm really concerned, especially when I look at a country like Great Britain and France, two that have been staunch allies, and at least in thought, to the United States. That are crumbling from within, and that's really, I talked about a little bit earlier. This is a tactic, for sure, that's being used, not just the far left, but by communist countries. You won't see any of this stuff going on in Russia. You won't see it going on in China.
China, yeah, they banned the stuff on Chinese TikTok. I tell you what,
correct. You won't see it going. Yeah. Why is that happening?
Yeah, why is it? Because they understand. Yeah, and actually, they really did do this. There was this whole movement called the femboy movement that was Chinese youth were getting into. It was kind of a trend coming from Korea and Japan of all these feminized young boys, and that was sort of the cool thing. And China went in and just shut that down. They said, if we see that stuff on our internet, we're done with that. You're shutting it, because they realize there's there's an impact.
There's a cause and an effect.
Yeah, they want to have an army big enough to take over Taiwan. They can't have a bunch of femboys taking over Taiwan. So anyway, to your point, exactly right. But let me do this real quick. We got a couple minutes. So I want to pull this up on the screen, guys. This is where we're at when it comes to the percentage of U.S. adults who identify as LGBT by generation. Okay, this is fascinating. All right, so each color. If you're listening about radio, I'll try to explain this to you. Basically, in 2022, here's the percentage of people by generation that identify themselves as LGBT. So with the people born before 1946, 1.7. That's the the greatest generation. The baby boomers, it's about 2.7%. Gen X, it's about 3.3. Millennials, it shot up to 11%. All right, so that's because that's basically when all that movement started getting traction. Gen Z, we're up to 20% identify as LGBT. Now, if you look at decades prior, this graph here goes to decades where you can see how these trends have just accelerated and ramped up. And so you cannot tell me you're born this way. If you were born this way, this would be a static, consistent thing. This is a result of conditioning and propaganda that we've undergone for the past 20, 30 years. The LGBT movement was successful. They changed culture. And the result is people now find this fashionable, especially young women. And for all like I said, we feel like there's problems with that all around, but it's just facts. That's where we are. So anyway, we're talking about Pride Month. I think there is hope. We're pushing back. The culture is kind of rejecting this. So we'll be right back. We're going to talk about more of this. Texas, we want to hear.
back to Kentucky's Voice Radio online at kyvoice.org.
All right, we're back to Kentucky's Voice. Thanks for watching. Hey, we're talking about Pride Month. This is the end of Pride Month, and this is Pride Month 2025, June. Of course, everybody knows, if you follow politics, what Pride Month is. It's the celebration of all things LGBT plus, whatever they call it these days, 15,000 genders. And the flag that keeps growing in colors and designs because it's never ending. It's just a movement that eats itself now. Actually, it's kind of interesting. There is a lot of conflict within the movement now between, the traditional just gays and lesbians, and they're starting to push back on the transgender folks, and they're squabbling now, and the feminists in the ranks are like, if we can't define what a woman is, then why even be a feminist? So suddenly you're taking our rights away because some man wants to walk into bed. I mean, so it's really kind of interesting to watch that movement kind of eat itself. But so there is hope here. There is hope, and we want to talk a bit about that in this segment. And Bob, we had a couple of texts come in. Let's jump to those.
Yeah, we did text questions. More of a question. Late age of culture may show less active Christianity in civilizations, and they frame that question mark.
Exactly.
And
totally agree.
Then the person asks, please repeat the lesbian speaker's name that you played a little bit earlier.
Yeah, Camille Paglia. She's been around since the 80s, writing some interesting stuff. And so she's just known as a kind of one of these second wave feminists, if you want to get into that academic level. But she's Camille Paglia. A lot of good stuff on YouTube. Her interview with Jordan Peterson on this topic, great. You got to check that out. And but yeah, back on the original point, yeah, of course, yeah. It seems like, Bob, there's almost a spiritual, truth to this. A rich man has a problem. There's a scripture about the rich man it's hard for a rich man to get to heaven as it is for a camel to get through the eye of a needle. And I think that the point is that the more affluent you are, the less you have a need for just the basics of life, and the less you call on God and things spiritual, and so that seems to play out in culture. As the more affluent cultures get, the less we sort of are drawn to things traditionally and traditional spiritual, and so the cultures start getting away from their spiritual roots, and they start going off the rails, and so I think it's just a spiritual truth.
Well, that's really what the fall of then the greatest culture on the face of the earth, the Roman culture. They were having the spectacles of the gladiator games and the circuses, and I mean, really became total debauchery, murder, and death for entertainment purposes.
That's right.
And yeah, that's absolutely correct. That's where I think we find ourselves in as a culture, and again, I keep stressing, but it is so important that President Trump got elected to lead this nation. We just have seen this over the weekend, the importance of that, and where we are, I think, culturally, and truthfully, it's the American people pushing back and saying, you know what, enough's enough. We're sick and tired of this, and we need to go in a new direction. We know our own legislature has been pushing back against it. They passed Senate Bill 150 a couple years ago, and it basically said no to gender-affirming surgeries on minors and in procedures, and so it's now banned in our country. No thanks to our governor, who tried to, who in fact actually vetoed this important bill, and of course our state legislature, because of a supermajority, was able to override the governor's veto.
Yeah, no thanks to Governor Bashir, and his embrace of all things LGBT, and I mean, that picture of him hanging out with that drag queen crew and the state capitol a few years ago, that's going to haunt him.
Well, that was early on in his administration.
Tom. Right? Exactly. Yeah. He embraced it early on, and he's doubled down on it, and he thinks himself as being
he's not backing down. He's not backing down at all.
you think he thinks he's morally superior by doing that, and so it's so sickening, and and also Pete Hegseth at the Pentagon, he's pushed back on all this transgender stuff, and he basically came out and said it. Listen, we're done with this woke blank, and he used an expletive that I can't use on the air, but we're done with this. We're not doing this stuff anymore, and at the end of the day, people understand the military needs to have a masculine ethos to it, because your enemy does. And so you better stand up to him as a man. And not that women can't fight, but there's still a certain amount of, spirit and masculine energy that you need to bring to a fight. And because when women want to fight, guess what? They get their dander up and fight in a masculine way, or else you don't fight like a feminine girl when you're going to try to win a fight.
And I'll say this: I know one of the B-2 bomber pilots that dropped the bombs in Iran was a female.
That's right. God bless him.
Praise God,
there's certain roles that's appropriate.
Very talented, and there are things, truthfully, especially when it comes to precision things like that women, quite frankly, can be better than a man at.
That's
However, on hand-to-hand combat,
that's right.
I'll take a man every day and twice on Sunday.
That's right. I always look
when
at
that happens.
Do you want a team of men Navy SEALs rescuing you in a hostage situation, or a team of women Lady SEALs landing? And I'm not to say that women aren't capable of doing things. There's just difference in physical strength and ability in certain things. So it's just common sense, and people, and it's just, and each of us have duties to play. There's duties men have in society, in culture, and duties women have, and we should honor that on some basic level. Whatever, it's a side topic, but there's hope. There's hope with this moment. I think, like you said, the Donald Trump election, the rejection of woke. There is some pushback with our state legislature, nationally. The culture starting to reject Pride Month, and I think there's even going to be a moment here, maybe sooner than we think, that the same-sex marriage ruling in the Supreme Court may get overturned. And the reason I say that, and I'm going to read a clip here, read a few statements from this article from someone here in Kentucky who wrote about this, that it has the same sort of premise as Roe v. Wade. It's bad law. It's running on assumptions that aren't really constitutional, and so it's anti-democratic in its nature, and so I don't think it's going to hold up over time. So mark my words, sometime, maybe not in my lifetime, but this is going to be overturned because it's just bad law. And so the whole movement has kind of rested. It's kind of anchored itself in that decision, and so.
Well, we're already seeing the Supreme Court just handed down, hot off the press, a decision it was fair admissions versus Harvard regarding affirmative action in college admissions, as far as them using that DEI. Appropriated type of things that they, or evaluations that they were using, and the Supreme Court slapped them down. And this is the amazing thing: 9-0.
Wow.
That the Supreme Court ruled and said that you can't do that. In this country, and that is going to have a long-term positive effect with regard to, now on the left they'd say chilling effect, but it's a good thing.
It's a great
the
thing.
Supreme Court, because again, it's coming back to what you were talking about earlier. Somebody should be put in based upon merit. The best person, the cream rises to the top.
That's right.
You want that in anything that you're doing, and certainly we know in our military how critically important that is.
That's exactly right. Yeah, and you can't reduce physical standards just to be politically correct. It's going to cost people's lives, and we may just lose a war, and that's just not worth the risk. I'm going to go back to this article from. If you want to read this, it's in Kentucky today. Martin Cothran, he's with the Family Foundation. I'll just go to the key thing here. We're talking about Obergefell, which is the ruling, Supreme Court ruling that said that there's a constitutional right to same-sex marriage, and these state laws, and he's talking about the state laws that most states had passed that said marriage is between a man and a woman. We had one in Kentucky. It says these state laws, which simply codify the truth of marriage, understood by everyone, male and female, child and adult, whites and people of color, upper and lower classes, straight and gay, for all recorded history until about 20 to 30 years ago, was effectively invalidated by one unelected judge. U.S. Supreme Court Justice Anthony Kennedy. He wrote the majority opinion. Kennedy was the swing vote, but of course 4 others voted with him. One of the justices who did not vote to redefine the most foundational institution of human society was Anthony Scalia. He was, as was his practice before his death in 2016, he was able to beautifully capture the absurdity of the liberal jurisprudence as applied. So here's what Kennedy said, or Scalia said. The 5 justices who compose today's majority are entirely comfortable concluding that every state violated the Constitution for all of the 135 years between the 14th Amendment's ratification and the Massachusetts permitting the same-sex marriages in 2003. They discovered in the 14th Amendment the fundamental right overlooked by every person alive at the time of ratification and almost everyone else in the time since. They see what lesser legal minds like Thomas Cooley, John Marshall, Harlan, Oliver Wendell Holmes, Learned Hand, Louis Brandeis, William Howard Taft, all these great, jurisprudence, all these great justices, they didn't see this. They could not see this, but suddenly we discovered this. And so it just shows that this is just made up law, just like Roe v. Wade, and this is going to get challenged because it's not democracy. These sort of issues should be settled by law. Now, there is no constitutional right to these things, and so anyway, that's a whole other issue. But I see hope on that front too. I think there's a legal pushback that can come on this. And why are we against same-sex marriage? I'm against same-sex marriage because marriage is sacred. I'm not against gay people that want to have relationships with one another and commit to themselves. But marriage is sacred. Marriage is something real specific. Yeah. It's men and women, and it's designed, one man, one woman, designed to create a nuclear family where we can have children, and so we can have a kind of a core institutional political block in our society that can help it grow and grow forward.
And we did get a couple quick texts in. I want to read real quick. MAP, minor attracted person, also known as pedophile colors, are on the pride flag, light blue and yellow. Yeah. And then the other comment was young women that say they are male should sign up for the draft.
Which, that's right. Exactly right. Yeah, exactly right. Well, exactly, because that's the problem with this movement. It went from just lesbians and gays that want to be treated fairly to embracing all these and celebrating and kind of advancing the agenda of all these very deviant, questionable practices, such as even pedophilia and such as things that are just wrong on 15 million levels. So anyway, Pride Month, thank God it's over soon and this year, and I think it's maybe over permanently. I don't think anybody's going to get behind this much.
We'll take pride in our military, Tom.
That's right. Pride in our military and pride in America. Okay, listen, you're listening to Kentucky's Voice. Appreciate you watching. We'll see you tomorrow. And thanks, Bob, for being on the show. God bless America.
My pleasure.